Dr. Jazz.
But I wanted to start this talk
Dr.
with you
Jazz.
get what you give, and you as a band leader, and that's such a great record. I was just thinking about your compositions. It starts with you actually doing a solo, and then it goes into this groove, and the melodies you've written are beautiful. And have you been preparing something new on the band leading department, or?
Well, actually, the latest thing, the couple of projects I've been involved in related to that, I've been leading gigs around town, around Boston, with quintet, playing that music. So some of the same people that are on the record, like Ernesto Diaz on percussion, Oscar Stagnaro on bass,
Mm.
and Mike Tucker on sax. And now Oscar and I and Ukrainian pianist Maxim Lubarsky have formed a trio called Triad. And we've been doing a lot lately, and we've all been featuring our compositions.
Yeah, fantastic.
So we just did something for the WGBH Boston. They filmed us and recorded us. So it's kind of a big deal because it was a really nice studio. And so we've been doing more with that trio. And I also have a similar project in Chicago. I go to Chicago because that was my hometown. I go back there once in a while and I form a band. And the latest thing I did was a Brazilian project.
Oh, wow.
And it was sort of co-led with a dear friend and fantastic piano player named Jim Trumpeter, who he's involved with creating game music
Oh, wow. Okay.
during the day, and he also teaches at DePaul University. But he's a killer jazz pianist, and we also featured a great singer-songwriter, guitarist from Brazil named Luciano Antonio on that project. So that's a thing that's probably going to happen. But also during the pandemic, I studied jazz composition because
Oh,
nothing
really?
else
Oh,
was
wow.
happening.
Okay.
So I got a master's in jazz composition from UMass Amherst,
Wow.
and I for the thesis you were supposed to write a suite of music. So I chose big band format.
Ooh, okay.
So I wrote these 5 movements, and they haven't been recorded yet, but I'm going to perform them at Concordia College in Fargo, North Dakota. At least one of the suites. I mean, at least one of the movements, and that's happening next month. So a
Fantastic.
big band's going to play that, and it's going to be for a day of percussion that they're having over at the college.
Mm.
And one of the tunes that I included in the suite was also written for a percussion ensemble. It's called Time's Up, and it was featured in a video for Percussive Art Society in 2021. So I was writing it, and I was over deadline, and somebody asked me, "Are you through with that piece yet?" I said, "No, I'm still working on it." He said, "What are you going to call it?" I guess Time's Up because it's overdue.
Oh, fantastic. That's good news. I mean, that,
Yeah.
a lot is happening. I love that record that you did like 6 years ago already, but it's a strong record. I mean, how did you decide to do that one actually? What was the impulse that you said like, okay, shit, I'll do a band leading record?
Well, actually, it kind of goes back to another school experience. So, when I got out of high school, I mean, most people go to college after they get out of high school. Maybe they'll take a gap year for 1 year and then they'll go to college. I took 40 years. And so, because I'm teaching at Berkeley and I was teaching at Berkeley online, I found out that I could also be a student online at Berkeley, and I took the program. So I went through the
Oh,
program
wow. Okay.
2016, and in 3 years I got a bachelor's. But the degrees don't mean anything to me because I don't need them. I mean, it's something to put next to your name if you want it. For me, if you're younger, it helps to have a degree if you want to get a job at a
Yep.
university.
Teaching, yeah.
But I've been teaching for like, 15, 20 years at Berkeley already, and I didn't really need anything. But the cool thing about Berkeley is that sometimes they give faculty a recording grant. So those sessions on You Get What You Give were all the result of recording
Okay.
grants from Berkeley. So it was all recorded at Berkeley with a Berkeley engineer, all Berkeley faculty pretty much. So it was, yeah, so that, and those sessions were far apart. So I think like they were maybe even 12 years apart,
Mm.
the sessions. So I included some of the tracks on that album in my book, which is called World Jazz Drumming. And the other sessions, I needed more music, so we just did another session. But it was fun, it was fun going in and leading. And I still do those sessions. I have a lot of music
Oh, fantastic.
in the can, as they say. So I have things come up all the time. And sometimes they need groups for recording classes at Berkeley. So I'll put a band together. I've done several big band sessions like that.
Mm.
They want to teach the kids how to set up the sessions in the studio and how to record things. So I've done like 3 or 4 big band sessions, and it continues. Sometimes I also teach at New England Conservatory, and sometimes I'll bring them, my ensemble from New England, into Berkeley and record something. So it's a good experience for everybody, because I feel like recording and hearing yourself on the playback is kind of a university
Oh
in
yeah,
its,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. This record is Paquito also on 2 tracks, and you mentioned Brazilian music, and where does this love for other kinds of jazz, I'll put it like that, come
Yeah.
from? I mean, how did you encounter that? Like, or are they as a teenager, or?
Well, basically, one of my earliest experiences, when I got out of high school, like I said, I just wanted to play. And I took as many gigs as I could, and I got to know the drummers around town who were really working, and they needed help with, subbing sometimes. So I would sub for different people. And at one time I got to sub for a great drummer named Phil Gratteau. He was working with a band, a real Brazilian group, with about 3 Brazilians who had moved up from Porto Alegre, the south of Brazil, to Chicago, where I was living. And I started working with them, and then I pretty much got the gig because they sent for one of the musicians that they wanted to play with on drums, Louis Everling, who's a great drummer. But in the interim, I was doing the gig. So there were several years where I was playing that gig.
Mm.
And I got to know repertoire, and I really fell in love with the music. And there was the singer used to work at the Brazilian consulate during the day, and her colleague would come and he would give me tapes of all the stuff that was happening in Brazil. So I really fell in love with that music hard. And then a few years later, Paquito D'Rivera and Claudio Roditi, great trumpet player, they came
Sure.
to town and they needed a rhythm section. So Howard Levy, who later played with Bela Fleck.
Yeah, yeah, I played with Howard. Yeah, we recorded and
Yeah,
toured.
yeah, you know Howard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he put a band together and I got called for that. And
Ah,
Paquito
okay.
and I just clicked. We hit it off. And Paquito uh, said I got the gig. And so I started coming to New York around 89, and we started traveling together.
Mm.
And one of our really my first time in Europe playing was at Perugia at the Umbria Jazz Fest.
That's a start.
And we were there for 10 days. We played at this club every night, and then we played the big stage on the last night. That was incredible. It was
Mm.
just like I got to see everybody playing on the big stage, and then we would do our gig. So, we
Fantastic.
had world-class players on our gig too. So we had like Giovanni Hidalgo on percussion and Danilo Perez on piano, and it's just Farid Haq on guitar.
Oh yeah, sure.
So it was smoking band. Anyway, I'm still working with Paquito these days,
Really?
and
Oh wow,
coming up,
amazing.
we've got a couple of gigs coming up next month. We're doing a 70th celebration, 70th anniversary celebration of Paquito being in the music business. So he's like 77 now or 76.
Wow,
And we're going to play at Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York.
incredible.
And there's going to be some incredible players. I'll get to play with the percussionist Roberto Vizcaíno Jr. For the first time. and he's just a beast. Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to playing with him. So yeah,
Fantastic.
so I was thrown into this world playing with Paquito. I mean, there we were, and people were playing with us like Danilo and Claudio and Giovanni and all these people that sat in. It was like a total immersion program into Afro-Cuban. And the thing is, Paquito, he'd always like to branch out. He would not just play Afro-Cuban stuff.
Yeah.
He would play Brazilian, Venezuelan, Uruguayan. He'd play everything. Argentinian, especially Argentinian. He really loved, like he said, he loved the music of the illegal aliens, as he put it. He used to crack those jokes and then it kind of went away, but now he's cracking those jokes again, like big time. Anyway,
It's a good time to do that. Yeah.
yeah, right. And yeah, I mean, I did get actually Dizzy Gillespie sat in with us
Oh,
time.
wow. Oh, incredible.
Yeah, and then I got a call to play with him and Dizzy as a special guest, like a whole program. And then Dizzy passed away before it ever happened, but that would have been amazing playing with
Mm.
Diz.
Wow. Yeah, no, I noticed like because the first records I have you on is with Paquito actually, like 89 or 90,
Yeah,
91. Yeah.
yeah.
So he
The
must have been really
reunion, the
important. Yeah.
first one
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Arturo Sandoval.
Yeah, yeah. That's such a
Yeah,
strong record. Him and Arturo. I mean, Arturo is also a
right.
beast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to work with Arturo's band for almost a couple of years,
Wow.
from 2022 through 2024.
Also, wow.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. How was it like for you in the beginning? You mentioned Chicago, and I mean, who were the first players or the gigs you got? Because Chicago was, I mean, it's still, of course, like next to New York, I guess, and LA. I mean, there are many
Yeah,
centers
yeah,
now, but it's
it's a
hugely
real
important.
vibrant
Yeah.
scene. Yeah, the first people I worked with, well, actually, one of the first people to call me was Stephen Hashimoto, who was a bass player, and he led a band that he called Mothra,
Mm.
based on the old Japanese sci-fi movies. And it was really, I mean, one of his things was diversity in the music and in the personnel. We had all kinds of people. We had a guitarist from Tunisia, we had an Irish vibes player, we had an African American trombonist, like, but it just happened naturally. He wasn't trying to pick people based on who they were, just whether they could play.
Mm.
And it was a real fun experience, because we used to rehearse and then we go across the street and play at this club right across from his house. And I got to play with some really great players. And then my name sort of spread around and I got more gigs. And I was starting to do recording sessions. And I got to work a lot with Bill Dickens, a bass player who is now known as the Buddha of the bass. We did a lot of recording in R&B. So that just kind of spread out in Chicago. And really, Paquito was the first one I started traveling with. But I also had a little break from Paquito's gig for a couple of years from 92 through 94. And I started traveling with Lyle Mays.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because that Ludwigsburg concert came out like a couple of years ago, and
right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it came out a
it's
little bit late.
Mark Johnson on bass and Bob
It
Shepard.
was
Like,
incredible.
how
Yeah.
did you get the gig with Lyle actually and playing with him?
Well, basically, I was playing with Lyle in a band led by Paul McCandless.
Oh yeah, another friend of mine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that was documented on
Premonition you did, right? No.
Premonition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I first met Lyle on that session, really, because we were recording together, and Steve Rodby basically hooked that all up.
Oh.
So Steve Rodby was part of that band. So we had Paul McCandless, Lyle Mays, Steve Rodby, me, and Fred Simon, who I had recorded a couple of CDs with previous to that. And he was playing like keyboards and synths, and Lyle was playing piano. So yeah, it was a great band. So Lyle and I had gotten together and played in that band. So Lyle called, and there was some talk of me being called for Oregon. And in '96, Steve Rodby produced an album called Northwest Passage. So they
Hmm.
called me for that. And we hit it off, and Ralph Towner said, "Yeah, you got the gig if you want it." So that was cool. 23 years I played with that band.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Oregon later. Yeah.
Sure. But Lyle, like Ralph Towner, Lyle was an amazing composer, and he would really emphasize that, really thinking about composition while playing in real time.
Mm,
And that was the thing that set him apart from a lot of other players. He would really aim, he'd have like a long view or like a more expansive view
mm,
of music. And we did actually did some studio projects together besides the Paul McCandless record. He had a couple of dates that he had a couple of things he did for Rabbit Ears Records. And Rabbit Ears was producing like CDs for children that were narrated by famous people.
mm.
And we did a couple. Uh, One was, let's see, what was it? Well, actually, he hired me for three soundtracks. One was Mustang, The Hidden Kingdom. Another was The Lion and the Lamb for Rabbit Ears Records. And there was another one, I can't remember. I have the CD somewhere here. But, everything that Lyle touched was basically like gold
Mm.
because maybe not monetarily, but like production wise, it was just second to none, just the sounds. And Steve Rodby was a big part of that because Steve, produces a lot more people than people realize.
Yeah,
He really upgrades anything he's involved in to a very high degree, sound wise and otherwise.
yeah, definitely. Beautiful, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
The, the, at the same time, I wanted to ask you, speaking of piano players, about Michel Camilo, because like it seems like the 90s, late 90s for you must have been crazy. Uh, like
Yeah.
there's Lyle Mace, and then Michel is like, I think, a complete other side of the style of Lyle, let's say. I mean, both are virtuosos, but you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
different
Well,
music.
I got
What's
uh,
the
I
story
got the
with
gig
Michel?
with Oregon and with Michel Camilo pretty much at the same time, around 96. And I
Fantastic.
was already working with Paquito. And I was also going over to Germany and working with some of the radio bands. Like I worked with NDR from around 90 94 on.
Mm,
And then we did some CDs with them and also with WDR, VDR. And then I actually did a couple of concerts with HR from Frankfurt with Oregon because Jim McNeely arranged a bunch of
yeah, yeah,
charts
yeah.
for them. That was pretty incredible. But yeah, Michelle, actually, I have a gig coming up with him in June.
Ah,
He,
you're still playing. Okay, fantastic.
yeah, once in a while he'll call. I mean, he mostly uses Daphne Prieto, who is a beast, but once in a while he calls me, and which is great. So I'm going to be shedding his material, and but we worked together quite a bit over the years, like especially from 96 through 98. We actually went to tour the world. We went to Cuba. It's the first
Mm,
time I've been in Cuba. And we went to Spain a lot and toured Europe. And actually, he called me just at the start of the pandemic, and then everything got shut down. So he called me to work with his big band a few times, which
mm,
was a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
And we've done recording projects together, but it hasn't been his trio project. It's been more like pop projects that he's produced, which I'm really happy to be a part of. He
sure.
produced a couple of CDs for Ana Belén, and some other singers. And he had me play on a song for a Dominican TV show. So it was fun, just coming and doing sessions for him. I mean, he's an amazing producer as well as an amazing piano player and
Yeah, yeah.
really nice, really sweet person too.
How do you cope with that with his music? Let's say because rhythmically it's really challenging. I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of the tunes I have to slow down and
yeah,
just
right.
repeat, 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 repeat. So yeah, I mean, I probably later today I'm going to start practicing his material for that gig because
Yeah.
it's coming. June's going to be here, like that. But I think for anybody practicing a real challenging gig like that, if you just slow it down and repeat it endlessly, just do it regularly, and don't cram at the end, then you'll be okay.
Yeah, because it's
But
really
you
like
know,
a
I mean, when I first got the gig with him, I feel like my technique was not really that great, you know.
mm,
I mean,
interesting.
not that it's great now, but I have been studying. I'm studying with a former colleague at Berkeley who has his own school. His name is Henrique de Almeida, and we're studying a lot of hand technique and hand and foot coordination and polyrhythms. And he teaches, one of the things he teaches is the some of the methods of Alan Dawson and
Hmm.
Gary Chafee. And Gary Chafee was very instrumental in the development of people like Steve Smith and Vinnie Colaiuta for their vocabulary. And Alan Dawson, of course, Tony Williams.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of people study with Alan Dawson. So I'm sort of getting their teaching secondhand through Henrique. And I'm trying to pass his teachings on to other people. And then sometimes he uses some of my stuff too. Like he'll use like my tune Deep Six.
Hmm.
in
Yeah, yeah.
his teaching. Yeah, so it's
The
good. I
organ
mean,
one.
I
Yeah.
think everybody, no matter how good they think they are, should still keep studying because there's always somebody that knows more than you know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love this. You've been mentioning all the time now, basically, that you still
Yeah,
study and practice, and which is
yeah.
yeah, good to hear.
And he told me, Henrique told me that there are a lot of real top professional players that study with him that don't want people to know that they study. Like, what is that? Come on.
Being the
Dave
same
Weckl
position.
studied
Yeah.
with Freddie Gruber and everybody knew about it, you know. Why not? Like
Sure.
that should inspire everybody. Just
Exactly.
inspire everybody to keep studying.
Yeah. It's funny. You sometimes speak with, I know Schofield pretty well, and I see him every now and then when he's in Europe. And after the gig, I'm like, man, John, you killed it. No, man, shit, I should practice. It's like I was like, come on, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know it's not just saying that these people still play. When they are 70 something, and like Frizzell the same. Like, okay, still working on stuff and Stern, and speaking of guitars, like incredible.
Oh
It's
yeah, oh yeah. You always hear stories about Pablo Casals practicing when it is in his 90s, and people asking him, "Why you practice? Because you're 90." He was, well, I feel like I'm just starting to make progress. Something like
that's
that.
dedication, man. That's like
Yeah,
but that's a nice thing. I mean, it's true. It's like always areas to improve, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, uh,
I think the thing is not to get overwhelmed,
yeah, yeah. That's a different
because
story. Yeah,
there's so many methods, there's so many
it's a different story.
choices. But if you have guidance, I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Oregon before, and I'm a huge fan of Oregon, and I found out about you through Oregon, kind of, and I played with Paul later, and uh, how was it for you, getting that gig? Because, you know, uh, you're completely different than Colin and Treelock, and you made like a completely different sound of the group, yet the group still sounds like Oregon, right? Like,
Right.
how was that gig like for you? I mean,
Well, I mean, I just tried to find something that would fit each tune.
mm,
I didn't really have a setup in mind. As a matter of fact, when I got the call to record with them, that was my first time meeting them. I think I got a demo of the music. I lived in an apartment and I had a basement full of percussion, and I just grabbed everything I could and just brought it into the studio and crafted like an improvised setup. And they told me that they didn't really want the sound of the bass drum because they didn't want to interfere with the bass. For a while I played with no bass drum, but then I eventually added a bass drum. And I mean, some fans didn't really like it that much because they thought it sounded more like a contemporary jazz group or
mm,
something like that after a while. But when you put drum set in a group like that, I mean, it's going to sound like that. It's actually they've recorded with drum set before.
yeah, with Elvin,
Elvin did a
actually. Yeah,
record.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but it just depends on the tune. I mean, Ralph, I mean, the fact that there was drum set, it sort of changed Ralph's style of writing in a way, maybe. I don't know. Ralph
I think
could
it
tell
is.
you
Yeah,
more than
yeah,
me.
yeah.
But I tried to keep the percussion elements in there, but I don't really consider myself a percussionist. I mean, I'm a drummer who's just sort of faking it on percussion. But if it sounds good,
Absolutely.
um, you know, I'll go with it. But I never really dedicated myself to seriously studying percussion.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So,
It's a,
some people are going to be horrified, but that's what it is.
no, but you have percussionists who were
I mean,
percussionists all the
when
time.
Ralph said, yeah, when Ralph said, okay, you got the gig, I said, are you sure? Because I don't play tabla. He said, no, I'm sick of that sound. He was joking, of course. But I did have a tabla sample on one of the electronic things I used. I didn't use it very much.
Yeah, yeah. No, but
But,
yeah,
of course, that said, I really respect everything. I love and respect everything that Colin did with the band. I mean, he was amazing.
yeah,
He was really the guy for them. And it was so tragic that he died in that car accident. And I always thought listening to Trelock and Glenn Moore together, that was like oil and water. Like time was all over the place.
yeah. So true. Glenn told me about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. But it was exciting.
It
It
was,
was
yeah,
really cool because it was unpredictable, And really, I mean, when we played, well, after a while, I really tried to get Glenn to groove with me, like on a grid, but it's just was not going to happen.
yeah, yeah.
I just had to let him be him and
Yep.
not try to force anything. But I could hear like on Prime that record. I really tried to get him on the grid, try to make him groove. Not going to happen.
Yeah, it's his own vibe. Yeah, yeah,
He's not a metronomic type of player, He's
yeah,
just he's his own guy, and what he plays is beautiful. But it's just when you're in an ensemble, it's hard to play with people like that
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
if the time is like all over the place, it's like, what am I supposed to do? What am I doing there?
Yeah, but still worked. I mean, it's a long
Oh, we
period.
had some great nights. I mean, we had some,
23 years. That's a lot. That's
yeah, yeah. I mean, we had some nights where we really
yeah,
gelled together as a band, and it just felt so good. And there were some nice recording moments too.
yeah.
Um,
And then Paulino came,
and the
right?
personality, I mean, those guys are hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was fun hanging with them and traveling with them. And actually, I mean, I learned a lot about composition from Ralph.
Oh man, yeah.
Like I remember actually writing this tune, Deep Six. We were on tour in Canada in a van, and I'd be writing on my computer in the back of the van, and then I'd pass it up. I'd pass the computer up for Ralph to listen to with a set of headphones, and he'd listen to it and says, "Change the first ending," and he'd just pass it back because he has a great intuition about these things. Like he knows when it's right, when the compositional arc is flowing, and he knows when it sounds contrived or
Mm.
just not right. And then I kept going, and then I passed it back up to him, and he said, "Okay, that's good." So he didn't tell me what to write, but he told me what not to write
Mm.
in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was like my first composition teacher in a way because I had to make it sound right.
No, he's amazing. Yeah, yeah, he's
And
amazing.
there was things I submitted that he rejected too. So, okay, not everything is going to make the cut.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're hanging with Ralph Towner.
Oh man, he's one of the greats.
Yeah.
Such a composer. Yeah. Did how was it then when Paulino came?
Oh man, it was amazing. I mean, Paulino as an ensemble player just grooves like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
He was a great soloist, effortless, and he wrote some really great music too.
yeah.
And super nice guy, super sweet guy, and just a real great player. So yeah, I mean, it was so easy to play with him. we just all, nothing against Glenn, of course, but we all sort of breathed a sigh of relief when he was in the band. It's like,
I saw his Zagreb with Paulino, and it was beautiful years ago. And
yeah,
yeah, yeah, it was nice. He's a completely different player. I played with him quite some, and
oh yeah,
yeah, it's like he's so fluid. It's like
he's fluid. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, Glenn has so much personality in his playing. Like you just listen to it, you know it's him.
yeah,
So that was sort of a, I mean, not that Paulinho doesn't, but but it seems like, and not to cast any dispersions on Glenn, I love him.
He worked perfectly with Colin. I think Colin
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. Like it seemed like he made it more difficult for himself and not easier somehow.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah. But anyway,
yeah, yeah. No, no, definitely. No, it's beautiful. You got to work with one of the most important, what I'll put it, jazz. I'll say not world music.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
hate
mean,
the
I
term.
hope, like sometimes at New England Conservatory, where I teach an ensemble, they email everybody, hey, we were taking nominations for honorary doctorate, and I always put Ralph, and
Mm,
I have this nice thing, and they never chose him.
not
You
yet.
know,
Not yet.
come on,
Yeah,
this
he's
guy, this guy deserves more.
absolutely.
Just been overlooked.
Yeah, I think so too, actually. I mean, Paul as well.
Yeah,
Paul is a beast on the bass clarinet. I remember when we toured, and
yeah.
it's just like, man, he's a monster, and people know him mostly from Oregon, kind of, but he's such a great player.
Oh yeah, I love his soprano playing,
Oh,
and well, he's not playing oboe anymore, but
no,
yeah, he was one of the best.
yeah,
Just,
absolutely.
I mean, and one of my favorite things to do with that group was to just improvise because they're some of the best free players
Yeah,
because they think so compositionally. It's not just free
keep playing.
jazz.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like it's it's compositional. It's music.
Yeah, what they've been doing this free composition since 1970.
Hmm.
Like every concert, right? They had this thing going on, so
Oh yeah,
they developed their thing, Paul and Ralph. I mean, especially together. That's
for sure.
beautiful to hear. Yeah. Uh, Mark, I just wanted to ask you one thing. We mentioned Alvin before, like, and I just wanted to ask you about your jazz background. Like, who were the drummers that got you excited for jazz? Actually, I mean, how did you enter that world?
Well, I mean, definitely Elvin is one of them, but actually, the first time I heard Elvin, so to speak, was through Mitch Mitchell because I listened to a lot of Hendrix when I was
Oh,
like
okay.
11 years old, and that's when I started playing drums. So I heard this fluid, rolling sound of Elvin through Mitch Mitchell, and I didn't realize that I was listening to that. Then, when I was about 13, I went to a Buddy Rich concert by myself, and I sat next to an old man because we each had single tickets, and this old man was sitting next to me. He had a cane, and I'm watching Buddy Rich, and my mind is just blown. And he had the great Greg Hopkins, trumpet player, with him, who wrote this chart, uh, Nutville,
Hmm.
for Horace Silver
Yeah.
composition. And it was just so exciting. I was just being blown away. And there was Greg Hopkins. And in the middle of the show, Buddy announces to the audience, I'd like to introduce the Dean of Percussion, Mr. Roy Knapp. And this guy with the cane just kind of elbows me, like, help me up. He's in his 80s. So I help him up, and we're standing there. I'm standing there with this, 86-year-old guy. I'm looking up, and we're in the spotlight, and there's Buddy on stage. I'm like, what is happening here? And 3 years later, I walked into his apartment for my first drum lesson
Oh, wow. That's
because my
incredible.
neighbor knew him. So actually, he was 87 at the time I studied with him. And the first thing he said is, go to the piano and let's work on harmony and
Oh,
theory,
wow. Okay.
scales and stuff. And he said, you gotta study like a doctor or a lawyer if you want to make it. And but I got to see a lot of other drummers live thanks to my dad because he bought me tickets to go hear a lot of people. So I heard Art Blakey,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
I went up to Art Blakey. I was 16 years old and went up to him and I said, Mr. Blakey, do you have any advice for a young drummer? And he said, you gotta play with someone every night.
It's not a bad
Otherwise,
advice.
it's bullshit. Which really, I mean, I really didn't understand that until I started touring because then I understood like, oh, you get a closer relationship with the people you're playing with your instrument, with the music, and that's everything
Mhm.
when you're a musician. So I finally got it. And I also saw Max Roach. And Max
Mm.
Roach, my dad had this record called Deeds Not Words, and it featured a solo called Conversation. Do you know that solo?
No, I have to check it out.
Check it out. Unbelievable. It's like that's the first time I heard the concept of the
Write it
drums
down.
talking to each other. Because you would make a statement on the snare, they would make it on the tom, they would make it on the floor tom, and then they started conversing, and then the discussion got heated. It got to a faster tempo, and then it got confused. It went Picasso, and then it finally settled on something, like it was a real composition.
Mm.
Like Max Roach used to do the drum also waltzes, drums unlimited, one for Big Sid. So this came before that. It was sometime recorded in the 50s. So
Mm. Check it out.
I got to meet Max and tell him that I learned his solo, and he was really pleased with that. I was probably 18 at the time. And then Jack DeJohnette was a really important
Mm.
because I had heard this album by John Abercrombie called Timeless with
Oh
Jan,
man. Whew.
one of the best. And
Yes.
DeJohnette was just like, oh man, where is this guy coming from? It's like a combination of Elvin and Tony. And I got to see him. I saw him every chance I could. And actually, looking for recordings of him led me to Ralph Towner. So I heard Batik for the first time,
Oh yeah. That's
Eddie
a
Gomez.
Mons Eddie Gomez, yeah.
And that kind of led to knowing about Ralph and Oregon and everybody, and ECM.
Mm.
So yeah.
Interesting.
And a couple of amazing moments for me with drummers. I mean, I was working with a Brazilian band that I told you about, and Claudio Roditi and Portinho came and
Mhm.
sat in. And they played a blues. They played like blues walk, and they played in samba, and it was some of the heaviest samba I've ever heard in my life. Like played by Portinho, like he was coming from, you know, old school, but
Old
really
school,
stretching
yeah.
out New York energy. And I was just like, that was like hearing Buddy. I was just blown away. So that was a real important moment, because I really
Mm.
really connected with how samba was supposed to feel.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were various moments like that. Uh, Hearing Giovanni, of course, working with Giovanni
Yeah.
Hidalgo.
Yeah.
Sometimes I couldn't listen to him that closely when I played with him because I would be thrown off because I didn't know where he was coming from. So I would just like try to keep the rhythm as best I could and then let him do his thing. But we used to meet at sound checks and I would ask him to just play anything and I would just record him on these
Oh
cassettes.
wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And sometimes when we were recording together on Reunion, we were in Germany, in Frankfurt, and we were at a hotel. I said, "Hey, Giovanni, can I take a lesson with you?" He said, "Yeah, Mark, come to my room." And so there were no drums, but he would pull out the drawers and start playing like a cajon on the drawers and on the table. And I was trying to keep clave, and he just lost me. Man, I can't believe it, Doc, man.
You
And
were
he
the one.
said, "If Changuito were here, forget about it." And that's the first time I heard about Changuito,
Yeah.
the great percussionist and drummer. I mean, he's just like, I make sure that all my students know about Changuito because you can tell who's listened to Changuito and who hasn't when you
Mm.
hear somebody play a songo. If you hear somebody play a songo who you only listen to, like, I don't know, whoever, they just go ding it and ding it and get ding it and ding it and get ding it and ding it and get ding. But if you listen to Changuito, it's completely different thing because he tailored his drum parts to, and later timbali parts to each tune
Mm.
of Los Van Van.
Oh yeah.
And he's got this language like it's ridiculous. I was listening to Sandunga, Gandinga y Mondongo by Frank Emilio Flynn. It was like a Cuban All-Stars or something like that. And Changuito was playing a timbale solo. It was just the flow of 4/4 to 6/8, just how they can flow in and out of it is
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah. That's insane. Yeah.
completely mind-blowing. So, that really had an effect on me. And yeah, so like early on it was rock drummers, of course, but now later on it was like jazz and
You went through, yeah.
Afro-Cuban and beyond.
You got
So,
everything. Yeah.
yeah.
That's so important. Yeah. Amazing, man. Yeah. Mark, not to take too much of your time, but like, what's you mentioned, before Michel and Paquito, like, what's still on the schedule for you for this year? I mean, what are the upcoming
For this
things?
year, well, let's see. I'm going to Japan in a couple of weeks to teach in Hokkaido.
Oh, wow.
There's something called the Hokkaido Groove Camp, and it's led by the great Tiger Okoshi, who's
Oh,
a trumpet.
really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Fantastic,
he was
man.
on that Gary Burton album,
Yeah, yeah, I love Tiger, man. Yeah, sure.
Times Square. So yeah, Tiger is great. He's really amazing musician and teacher. So actually one of my best students came from that camp. He studied with me when he was 13. His name is Gen Yoshimura, and he's going to be making some headlines because he's an amazing drummer, and he's stealing all my gigs in Boston. So I trained him, like, he knows all the styles. Like he could play, I could send him on literally any gig and he could crush it.
Mm,
So that's, like who am I inspired by these days? It's the young drummers because they're coming up with a whole new set of sounds and
yeah,
a whole new vocabulary. And, sometimes they don't have the experience, but they have this energy and they have this different kind of sound, because it's very, very hip hop influenced.
absolutely. Yeah.
They have a whole different approach. Uh, anyway, and then I'll be doing Jazz at Lincoln Center with Paquito for
Mm,
his celebration in April.
perfect.
And in June, I'll be with Michel Camilo. And then probably in August, I'm going back to Japan. I'm going to be participating in a jazz festival in Kobe. And I'm trying to hook it up so that I can bring Triad over there, but I'm not sure if it's possible or not. But also, one of my former students, Ryo Shibata, is organizing a drummers showcase. So they're going to have all the great Japanese drummers, and they're going to have me in Japan, and that's going to be a lot of fun because I'm really
Fantastic.
participating in the drum thing. And I haven't done anything for PASIC, the Percussive Arts Society, in a long time, so I'll probably start thinking in that direction. But really, one of the main things I'm doing right now is I've got this new mentorship group that I'm running, and it's got about 25 drummers in it. It's called the World Jazz Drumming Experience. And what I do is I interview, so I run ads and I, promote it. And so people book a call with me. They watch my webinar first. So in the webinar, I talk about 3 secrets. And the secrets are basically like how to sound authentic in whatever grooves you play by a certain method that I call the 5-point method, where you do your research and then you really analyze the music and you really get to know the styles instead of just watching a YouTube video of somebody playing it.
Yep.
You do your research, and I have ways of doing that and breaking it down. And then another secret is how to approach coordination, and another secret is how to organize your practice time. So that's what you'll see. And then
Important.
people get to know my teaching style, and if they want to work more closely with me, they can book a call with me, and we can talk about what their goals are and what their struggles are. And if I can help them, I'll show them what that looks like, and they can decide whether or not they want to work together more closely. And the thing that that my group has that most other online courses and sites don't have is the mentorship, because I meet with a group twice a week online.
Wow, that's a lot, yeah.
And I have, of course, pre-recorded content as well and a community forum. But most sites are organized in courses and they teach what they teach. But I really find out what each student needs first, and then we go from there because everybody's different. Some people are looking for authentic grooves. Some people are looking for confidence. Some people are looking to make their technique better. So, I create a roadmap for every drummer through this program, and no two roadmaps are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like this is taking all my experience from working with all these great musicians and all my experience breaking it down for people at Berkeley and NEC and the collective, and this is what it is. But it's different for each drummer. So I really like this group, and I get a lot of people that are returning to the instrument after taking a break for 20 years or something like that. So it's really nice to see them getting back into it. And some of my students are doing pretty amazing things. So it's pretty cool.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, that's a lot of work then, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, I teach as well, so I know. I know where you are. So yeah.
Yeah. It's a
It
big
takes a lot of
dedication.
energy. Yeah, but it
Right.
gives a lot of energy back as well. So yeah,
Yeah. I
absolutely,
really want to, at the point where I'm still doing it, but I want to give back and I
yeah,
want to pass it on.
absolutely. Yeah, fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Mark, if you're going to be in Europe, drop me a line. I'm close to Austria, so we get together for
Yeah,
a beer or something. So
for sure. Yeah.
and we can hang or
That sounds great.
yeah. So, but otherwise, thanks again for finding the time and talking a little bit about your playing
My
and
pleasure. Yeah.
history and
Nice
everything.
talking
So,
to you.
you too. And I'll leave you a
Sure.
nice Sunday afternoon so that you can check Michel's charts now. So
Yeah, sounds good.
yeah, man.
All
Cool.
right.